Welcome to the Dose of Good podcast, where we celebrate good people and organizations working to make the world a better place. It can be easy to get caught up in the bad things going on in the world and forget about the good happening all around us each and every day. I'm your host, Erin, and I want to share these stories with you and give them the attention they deserve. I hope this podcast educates and inspires you and maybe even motivates you to share a dose of good in your community. Now let's get into today's episode. Today I'm going to be speaking to you about the Connections Peer Support Center. This location is in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, but there are other peer support centers throughout the state, and I'll give you information on how you can find those in the description of this episode. I did want to let you know that we do get into some heavier topics in this episode, including suicide and self-harm, so I wanted to let everyone know that up front in case you prefer not to listen to this episode. Otherwise, I knew nothing about this peer support center going into this episode other than a little bit of research I had done from their website. And I'm really glad that I learned about them because it's an amazing organization who's really helping people who may be struggling with their mental health and need that support, but maybe unsure about reaching out to a medical professional or something like that. And my guest, Fred, will get into that more. But I hope that you enjoy this episode and learning about this organization. And now let's get into it. Today I'm here with Fred Poisson, who is the Executive Director of the Connections Peer Support Center located in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So could you start by telling me about the mission of Connections as well as the work they do?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not located in just Portsmouth. We also have a residential program in Northwood, New Hampshire, and it's a free residential program. So our mission is basically to provide free mental health support that is self-driven and free of shame to adults in the state of New Hampshire. We focus mainly on the Seacoast area because there are other peer support agencies in the state of New Hampshire, and it's broken down into regions. There's actually 8 regions. And our residential program is designed as a transitional program for people either coming out of a clinical setting that need to transition back into everyday life and need support to do it. We offer round-the-clock peer support, so 24 hours overnight staff that's awake. So if you wake up in the middle of the night and you need someone to talk to, you have someone to talk to. But it's not just for people coming out of those settings. It's for people trying to avoid those settings as well. We call it a step-up, step-down program. So the step-down is coming out of the hospital, and the step-up would be stepping up the amount of support so you can avoid going into the hospital. So you have to be referred by a peer, which can be anyone who has had a lived mental health episode, right? And then we would interview you and see if you're an appropriate fit. And if you are, we can offer you a 90-day free stay with mental health support round the clock.
Oh, that's great that that's a service that's available. So is that the warm line or is that something different?
So the warm line is another part of the program.
Okay.
So we also offer a warm line, and we offer that 365 days a year from 5 to 10 p.m. We say it's only open to people in the state of New Hampshire, but we get calls from all over the country. We get calls from Hawaii, New Mexico, and we just talk to people on there. And it's a line that you can call that is free from the fear of intervention. We really are there just to talk to you, to listen to you. We're not going to try and direct you to do anything. We want to just help you kind of process what's going on.
Okay. And so you deal with just adults then, not youth or anything like
18
that?
18 and over.
18 and over. Okay. And how did you yourself get involved with the organization?
Yeah. So peer support's been a passion of mine since 2017. I practiced it in Maine for quite some time. I was running a behavioral health program prior to this in Maine, and I had always wanted to work a little bit closer to home because I live in Elliott, and I saw this come up in Portsmouth, and I said, hey, this is for me. and here I am.
That's
Yeah.
great. And you talked about how peer support plays a role just in that as long as a peer refers you, that's how that works.
Yeah, and so by peers, generally for a referral, we would be looking for someone associated with the organization, right? If you're in the hospital, we take referrals from social workers, things like that. But if you're someone looking for that step up option, right, where you need the support added in, we would ask that you come to the center or you contact the center, and then we would go with the referral process that way.
And can you share some of the other programs you offer? So I saw some workshops that you had on your website. Can you maybe give some examples of those? And
Yeah,
can
no,
anyone
absolutely.
participate in those or just people in the program?
Absolutely. So basically, right now at the center, we offer groups Monday through Friday. We have groups that focus on the different tenets of peer support. We have groups that focus on nutrition, wellness. We're basically trying to offer as much mental health and well-being support as we can to adults on the Seacoast for free. We understand that there is a huge need for it. We also try and run different workshops. We had a coach come in last month and do a series of coaching. She was a certified health and well-being coach. We're trying to do a little bit more of that just to offer those services up to people too. We have groups focused on goal setting. We have the Hearing Voices Network, which is really incredible. That one's actually offered online, and it's a group for people who hear voices and have alternative experiences, and it's run by people who hear voices and have alternative experiences. So it's being able to talk to people about what's going on with you without people judging you. Our groups change every month. We actually just wrote a really incredible calendar for September, and we're looking to do some different things there. We've partnered with Connors Climb, and we're actually going to be offering suicide prevention training every other Thursday starting in September at our center. So that'll be really really awesome, and that'll be offered in the evenings, and it's free. So you can come in and you can learn how to do have conversations with people about preventing suicide. And it's a really incredible program. Connors Climb is an incredible organization, and we're lucky to be partnered with them.
Well, it sounds like it'll be very helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So.
And September is Suicide Awareness Month, so it's
Is
a
it?
great
I
month
didn't
to start.
know that.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Well, hopefully, I think if this doesn't come out end of August, it's going to be September, so that will be perfect.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, wonderful.
And what sort of volunteer opportunities do you have available?
Yeah, honestly, we don't have a lot of volunteers. It's wonderful if people want to volunteer and come in and run a group, right? So we have a dietitian coming in this week who's volunteering her time. I've had some coaches come in and volunteer their time. But for the most part, we have employees, and we work that way. The volunteer process can be pretty expensive for a nonprofit organization. You have to run background checks, things like that. So we tend to just kind of focus on the staff right now.
Okay, that's good to know. And do you have any events or fundraisers coming up that you'd like to promote?
Well, we are going to be participating in Giving Tuesday this year, so that is the big one. We'll be starting our push in September, and I believe that one is in November.
Okay.
We just participated in New Hampshire Gives, and we were very successful with that, so thank you to everyone who donated. Doing some grant writing now as well, so that's good. But at the moment, yeah, New Hampshire Gives would be the big one that we're looking at.
Now,
Not New Hampshire Gives, my apologies. Giving Tuesday.
I was going to say Giving Tuesday, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully people will look out for that so that they can support and contribute to that.
Excellent. And we'll be doing a big social media push.
Oh, good. I'll share all your socials too so they have that. And what would you say is the status of mental health in New Hampshire right now? Or if you want to cover New Hampshire, Maine, I don't know if that it would differ, but yeah.
No, I think people are struggling. I think people are really struggling. I think depression is big. I think anxiety is huge right now. I think it definitely matters that it's an election year. I think you have a lot of vulnerable communities that are really scared about what's going on right now. We're seeing a lot of them come into our agency. We have a lot of programming for the LGBTQ community, and we're seeing kind of an influx of those people because right now they're pretty terrified about the political landscape. But it's not just that. There's economic insecurity, there's food insecurity. We see a lot of that. And what's unfortunate is, we have a very specific mission. Our mission is that of mental health support. And we receive a lot of people that are also looking for support around food resources, health resources, things like that. And it's getting harder and harder to find the places that you can refer them to that actually have the resources to help them at this point.
Yeah.
I
Go
think
ahead.
you're also seeing an increase in anxiety among young adults, particularly young adults that are trying to get into the workforce, find housing of their own so that they don't have to live with their parents. And I think that there's a level of hopelessness there right now for them. We were talking before we started here about the housing crisis, right? And how things have shifted significantly. And what it's doing is it's making it so kids can't live in the places that they grew up. They can't live around their families. So we're definitely seeing a lot of anxiety in that area because, again, we do support young adults. We're actually trying to boost our young adult programming. So that we can support those people. But mental health is a huge issue in New Hampshire. I do want to say, though, that coming from Maine and moving into professionally into New Hampshire, you're very lucky to have the government that you do and the programs that they offer. 95% of our funding comes from the state of New Hampshire. We have wonderful people that oversee our agencies, that collaborate with us, that listen to us about our needs. And I think that's important because I think you hear a lot about how government doesn't work. And it's just nice to see that happening in New Hampshire. I grew up here and I always had the perception that that wasn't the case. So coming back to it now and seeing that this is happening is really, really wonderful.
That's very good to hear because I haven't heard that, and that's good for people to know. So it's nice to hear that you have that support from the government and that sort of stuff. Just going back to the mental health a little bit, is there anything in particular that you feel is contributing to there being so much anxiety, depression? I know you mentioned the housing, but is there anything in addition to that that you think maybe is having a more prevalent effect than it did prior, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be hard to argue against the political landscape of the last 8 to 10 years having a significant impact on mental health, not just with the LGBT community, correct, but communities in general. You're hearing language that dehumanizes people, that demoralizes people. You're hearing people be told to just kind of pull it together and get going, and we're ignoring what the issues are.
Okay.
And I think that plays a significant role in it, no matter what party you're from, right?
Sure.
It's about the idea of humanity. And I think that there's been a real lack of humanity over the past few years, and it's definitely starting to play out in the mental health of people around you. Just in the idea of people defending political stances, you see it come up quite a bit, and the anxiety kind of explodes in some of those conversations.
Sure.
So I think that's one factor. I think, again, though, if you go back and you look at economics, you look at food, it's becoming increasingly difficult for people to just live. And not necessarily like live the greatest life you've ever imagined, right? But just like live day to day and have enough money to pay their bills, send their kids to school, things like that. And I think the younger generation right now, kids 18 to 25, that area, there's genuinely this feeling of hopelessness and like, what are we going to do at this point? Like, you look at the environment, right? They're worried about the environment. They don't see people doing things about that. They see people arguing over it. They're worried about what they're going to do when they graduate from school with $60,000 in debt. And that's a minimum, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of a minimum of what you're going to graduate with. And they're also hearing from people that they're making a bad choice by taking on that debt, right? But it's also something that they've heard for years and years is actually going to make their lives better. So there's a lot of confusion there. I think healthcare in general causes a lot of anxiety. If you don't have enough money to go to preventative visits, right? Issues get bigger and bigger and bigger. If you don't have enough money to go see a therapist when you need it, your issues are going to get worse and worse and worse, and you're going to find ways to self-medicate those issues. And that leads to a whole other host of issues.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. It really makes it clear of how bad it is for, it sounds like a lot of people. And I mean, I know my personal experience, and I'm, comfortable and family of three. And yes, it's been harder, but I often think about people and think, how are they doing it right now? People either with large families, or like you've talked about, the people just coming out of college. And I don't know how they're getting by with what's been going on with prices and everything like that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that there's organizations out there to reach out to them and help them, but it sounds like a lot more could be done.
Yes.
So just so I have a little bit better understanding with what you do, so you're kind of I don't know if intervention is the right word, but kind of maybe can you like refer people to therapists if they need it, or how would that work?
So we don't do referrals like that.
Okay.
Let me find the best way to explain it. So we can be an intervention, right?
Okay.
There are a lot of cases where people don't necessarily feel comfortable talking to a doctor
Sure.
or a therapist about what is going on with them, because there is always that fear of intervention, right? If someone is talking about hurting themselves, right? We look at it through a different lens sometimes, right? Like self-harm doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to lead to something worse. We understand that can be a coping mechanism. So a lot of times people feel more comfortable coming to us, and then we talk to them about the other resources that we have. We actually work in complement with things like therapy, psychiatry. There's always been this big misconception that peer support is anti-medication. We are not anti-medication. We actually try our very best not to talk about medication because it's a personal choice.
Sure.
We just try to support people around their decisions. In terms of referrals, what we would talk about is the idea that, maybe you do need to seek a higher level of support, but that's your choice.
Sure.
And if you choose to seek that higher level of support, these are your options, right? And, we can walk you through the process. We'll support you through the anxiety that goes with it, but it's your choice. Peer support is self-driven mental health care.
Okay. And then if somebody is not in the Seacoast area and they are looking for this type of support, is there like a general website that would guide them to their local peer support, or how would they go about that?
NewHampshire.gov has all of that information on there. You can also look on our website, and we list some of those other agencies as well. And you can always reach out to us, and depending on the region you're in, we can direct you to which one to go to. But the other part of it is, if you walk into our center and you're not from the Seacoast, we're not going to deny you. There are people that walk over the bridge from Maine and come into our center, and we're not going to deny them either. People need mental health care support, and that's what we are here for.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And it sounds like you're doing very important work, and I appreciate you and all that you're doing.
Thank you.
You've covered a lot, very thorough, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like people to know or like to share?
Yeah, I want people to know that we're here. I want people to know that the resource is available, and that when you come to our center, you're not judged. Everybody goes through something with mental health. Everybody has some sort of lived mental health experience, or they're adjacent to someone having that lived mental health experience. And peer support is about letting you know that you're not alone in that. And sometimes it's just about absorbing the anxiety with you so that you don't feel it alone. It's a great model. It's not the only model, though, and I think that's important. And I want people to understand that when they approach peer support, that peer support works with other modalities, right? And it's not something where you just say to yourself, well, I'm only going to seek peer support. Yeah. And I think that's important, because we try to cover as much as we do, but there are a lot of other areas that we can't cover and that you might need support in. And what we're going to talk to you about when you come is how you seek that support, how you advocate for yourself in the mental health industry so that you don't become, for lack of a better term, a victim of it, right? And that's not to say that they're nefarious or there's any sort of, like anything to be paranoid about there, but it's just a lot of times there is that perception. People who have had an experience with the mental health care system that didn't necessarily go the way they want to, have trauma from that, right? And we help them process that trauma. We help them learn how to advocate so that they can avoid that trauma in the future. And we always try to encourage people to reflect and see if the experience maybe could be looked at a little differently and in a healthier fashion.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's good to know. And then I just have two final questions that I like to ask everybody who comes on. The first being, which nonprofit you think we should feature next?
I would have two, actually. I think a really, really good one would be Connor's Climb. I've really gotten to know them over the past month or so. I've partnered with them, like I said, but they're a great organization that is really just designed to educate people on talking to people about suicide so that we can avoid suicides, so that we change the language around suicide so that we're not saying committed suicide, we're saying they died by suicide.
Okay.
Language matters. I think they're a great organization. I think the other one that I would encourage you to reach out to would be a recovery-friendly workforce. I don't know if you've ever spoken to them,
No.
but they're another great agency that we work with. We're actually a recovery-friendly workplace, and I'm proud of that because what it means is that we are going to support our staff even if they're dealing with issues of substance use. We're not going to let them feel alone. We're not going to let them feel like their job's at stake. We're going to support them through what is a health crisis, and that is what it is.
Sure. And is there somewhere I can find out what those workplaces are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you go on the Recovery Friendly Workplace site,
There's a site.
Everybody
Okay.
is listed there that is a
Okay,
Recovery Friendly
perfect.
Workplace.
Oh,
They're a
good.
phenomenal organization.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll definitely look into them. And then the last thing is, what is the kindest thing you've ever witnessed or been a part of?
That's a tough one
I know.
because doing the work that I do, you see a lot of kindness. You stumped me.
You can take time to think about it. I know it's tough, but I think the nice thing for me has been that everybody who has been on this podcast has struggled because they've experienced so many kindnesses, not that they can't think of one. And that's kind of a message that I want to get out to people because you do hear so much of the negative and the bad news that you don't get to hear these good positive stories.
Yeah, I mean, I see people supporting each other every day, and that to me is wonderful. Actually, I think one of the kindest things that I've seen in recent times is we had an individual who was coming into the center, and they were really struggling. I'm not going to go into the details of what they were struggling with, but they were really struggling. They had been coming in consistently for a couple of weeks. They were pretty new to the center, but they were saying, that they were getting care that mattered to them, and they were having a really, really difficult day. And we had another individual who's been coming to that center for a while. They're pretty closed off, they're pretty quiet. And this other person that was struggling, they turned to them in the middle of, just this chaos that this person was going through. And they said, I'm really sorry that you're going through that right now, but I want you to know that you're not alone and that I've been there and you're going to be okay. And it was beautiful to see because these people don't have resources. They don't, and they don't have money, and they support each other, and they support each other with no expectation of that support being returned to them. And I think that is amazing when you see that level of humanity come out. I think the other one, and this is one that I want to highlight because you hear a lot of bad things about police departments, right? Like you constantly hear that the police don't handle situations correctly. We had an incident, again, I'm not going to say the timeline or anything like that,
Sure.
but we had an incident where we had to have a person removed from our property in Northwood. And they were struggling and they were sick. They were not violent. They could have been violent in that moment, but they were not someone that was looking to hurt someone. They were someone who was very, very sick. And I was able to go down and talk to the police department in Northwood and let them know what was going on. And when we did have to call them, I was blown away by the way that they handled that situation. They talked with this person for over an hour. They managed to get this person to put themselves in the restraints that they needed to be in and to walk to the car with them. There was no violence. There was no guns drawn. It was simply them talking to someone who was not okay and helping them to feel at least safe in the situation that they were in. And that, working in mental health, you worry about that. And I get it, like they have rough jobs, but like you worry about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to see that in practice and to see them make that effort with someone, that was really beautiful. And to me, that's an act of kindness.
Oh, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, because hearing that they were able to have that compassion and take that time to really listen to this person and, figure out the situation to not have to use force or anything like that. I think more people need to hear that that's happening with police departments, because I think there is a misconception about how they handle things. So I'm really glad you shared that and that it worked out that way.
I'm grateful to them. I really am. So thank you.
Yeah. And I guess that's all. So thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing about your great organization. And hopefully it will reach some people who maybe need the help, and they'll be able to reach out to you to get some of the support that they need. So,
well, thank you for doing this. This is wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the Connections Peer Support Center and all the incredible work that they are doing. I will include their information as well as other resources down in the description box of the podcast, as well as on YouTube. And I hope that you will check them out and help support them in any way that you can. These next couple of episodes that I'm sharing with you are mental health based, and I think it is a very important topic to be discussed. So I'm happy to be highlighting these organizations. Be sure to let me know who else you would like to hear from on the podcast. Again, thank you for listening or watching if you're checking out the YouTube version. I greatly appreciate the support, and I hope that you'll share the podcast with everyone that you know so that more people can have their dose of good for the day. Don't forget to follow on Instagram and Facebook for the latest information about the podcast, and also leave a rating and review where you listen to podcasts so that more people can find out about it. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.